Hi, everyone. So this is kind of a chapter that we've been putting together, my friend who's the editor and myself. And so let's see how you guys like this one. It's called Confrontation and the Empowerment. My father adored me, but did not understand me. He was from a generation that carried the memories of the Depression and 2 world wars. A gentleman, he was going to be drafted into the Korean War, so his choices at college were to become a doctor or an engineer if he was going to avoid the draft. He chose to be an electrical engineer, but he spent the rest of his life protecting and serving his country. Education was of great importance to him, and getting us on the right foot to step out into the world was a top priority. My sister wanted to be a doctor from a young age, and I wanted to be a ballerina. The doctor thing was met with great approval from my father. The ballet thing, well, that was just seemed foolish. So he demanded that I take college prep classes as well as vocational office education, shorthand, and typing. He was going to make sure I was ready for work when all this ballet nonsense ended. It was hard when I was young to explain my dreams to him. He was smart and quick, and all my attempts to show value and meaning of ballet were countered with very rational, logical, and insistent statements of fact. How does one explain a personal artistic passion to someone who had already found his in a very different place? He hated everything that ballet was. He hated the frivolity of it. He hated the strange men that he saw in this art form. He tried to explain that I tried to explain that being around those strange men was much safer than going out on a date because they were never interested in me. That temporarily shut him up. He consistently tried to force me to change my mind with little acts of sabotage. When I was 13, he declared he would no longer pay for my ballet lessons, so I tearfully convinced my ballet teachers in Dallas to give me free lessons. A year later, he refused to give me the $35 I needed for pointe shoes, so my mother got me a job filing papers at her office to raise enough money to pay for them. My mother, Kay Kinslow Wagner, was the most avid supporter of my dream, but also the source of constant stress in the family. Her childhood was a nightmare. Her mother was an abusive alcoholic with Tourette's syndrome who smoked 4 packs a day and routinely dumped her daughter on other family members so she could take off on multiple benders. The result was a child who lived in constant fear, and I realized early on that she did not have much control over that anxiety. Her mind could not contain the emotional conflict and pain of her childhood. In moments, that wounded child would take control over her, often when my father was gone, running in terror from someone coming to hurt her, but running when there was nowhere to go. On all levels, it is amazing that my mother survived. The fact that she never lost her sweetness, her caring demeanor, or her desire to help others is remarkable. She was my first study in a complex character. I would spend hours watching her intently, the frantic motions of her hands, trying to let go of the constant anxiety she felt, the fearful eyes that sought acceptance when she was acting insane, the attempts to act normal when she never really felt normal. She taught me that all people have light and dark within, good and bad, fighting an endless battle for dominance. Everyone at times falls into the traps of illusion, despair, distortion, justification, and depression, but my mother could not comprehend a path out of the mental loops that life had mapped out for her. To me, fear was always the greatest enemy. I am grateful to my mother for that harsh lesson. In ballet, one learns that there will be constant fears surfacing. Ballet is a boot camp of pleasure and pain. It is so difficult that it filters out anyone without a strong psychological center. Ballet is always reflecting back to us our faults, and where we do not, make the grade. Fear will eat you alive if you let it. There is fear of falling, fear of getting injured, fear of not performing well enough on stage, fear of not getting a chance or a role, fear of not being able to do what a choreographer wants in the moment, fear of being too fat, fear of being too tall, fear of slipping and falling in a performance, fear of letting those down that are giving you a chance. Fear is an endless game that the ego plays with the mind, and if one becomes trapped in the games of fear, then you are bound to fail. My mother held the fort together in the most obvious ways that allowed for our reality to look normal from the outside. My mother reached out for professional help, but in the 1960s, if you were seeing a psychiatrist, it meant you were nuts. So the 19 years my mother spent seeing a Jungian psychiatrist was a subject never discussed outside the house. It was not to be discussed with the neighbors because of the potential embarrassment to my father, given his sensitive job. As a child, I lived in a house of secrets with uncomfortable dramas that were forever pulling at the tenuous threads that kept our family together. My father would be gone on business trips for months. We never knew where he was, nor were we allowed to ask. He would just appear and disappear. He was a ghost that moved in and out. He went to work at Texas Instruments in Dallas, but I was never told exactly what he did there. I came to believe that he must be involved in making those fancy calculators that were just coming out. Throughout my childhood, there were little clues that were not normal for any family I knew. He would be gone for months at a time. He could not phone home. My mother worried about him, and he seemed to always be traveling and very stressed by the time he got home. I would only learn much later what he was really doing. It was at the height of the Cold War, and he was the lead engineer for Texas Instruments' top secret paveway laser guidance system. During World War II, if you needed to destroy a critical target, saturation bombing was the only option. The idea being the TI system was to use the laser to guide the bomb directly to the target. A single bomb replaced 1,000 bombs with more precision and less collateral damage. The invention led to billions in dollars in contracts for Texas Instruments. When I accepted the job in Berlin, I didn't know that my father worked for NATO at the time, employing his guidance system to direct nuclear missiles at potential enemy targets, and that included Berlin. That was very much on his mind when he discussed my plans to leave. I was never sure with my father's moods. He was like a volcano. At moments, I would look up to him as he was what I wanted to become and what I wanted to look up to. But we admire a volcano more than regular mountains because it is alive. It shakes and rattles the ground under your feet, and it will occasionally blow its top. My father's moods were just like that volcano. You never knew what was up because there was this rumbling you could feel under the surface. And that tension would build up and continue to build up until it would eventually explode in a very dramatic way. My going to New York for that last year caused quite a rumble. He was adamantly against me going. He did not know that to finance the trip, my mother, who worked at the bank that held our mortgage, took the money out of our escrow account. When she gave it to me, she whispered, "You need to be very careful with this. This is all I could come up with without alarming your father." But now, I get this job in Berlin, and my father cannot seem to decide if he wants to be proud of me or pissed that I was not going to go to college. School was the most important thing to him. It made no sense. I was a straight-A student. Science and complex math were easy for me. He could see that I had the makings of a great engineer or something in the scientific fields. What could ballet possibly do for me? But I could see something that he did not, and that was that all of life is the school. It is a never-ending series of lessons. Life teaches the wisdom in all the books. It is a library of endless study if one allows a curious mind and an excited heart to wander and wonder. I knew deep inside that learning to control my own body, mind, and emotions in ballet was much more demanding and more fulfilling than studying books, solving math problems, and memorizing chemistry equations. Giving the mind things to solve and being tested on my ability to figure out a problem just felt like empty games without substance. To me, there was no risk to that. But that was my father's world. He had been in quite a sullen mood for weeks when he finally came up to me after dinner with a solemn look on his face and a tone that was deadly serious. And he said, "I am giving you a gold American Express card. This is not a plaything. This is only to be used in an emergency. Do you understand? Let me define an emergency. If I call you and tell you to get out of Berlin immediately, I want you to drop everything, leave all your possessions, grab the basics, your purse, your passport, and this card, and go to the airport and buy the first plane ticket out of Berlin. I do not care about the cost of that ticket. Get the first ticket you can and go anywhere in Europe. Just get out of Berlin. Do you understand? Are you clear about what I am asking you? Stunned, I stood there with my mouth open and nodded my assent. Then, with equal solemnity, he pulls out an envelope and hands it to me. Inside is $1,000 in cash, he said. You are going to need some money once you get there to get things set up. Just know that I do not approve of your choice, nor do I think it is a wise move for you. But I know I can't stop you. But know this, until you come to your senses, this will be the last money you ever get from me. Ever. Also, inside is a round-trip ticket for you to come back home when you realize how foolish and selfish you are being. This is also the last plane ticket I will buy for you. This choice is yours and yours alone, and you will live with the consequences of your actions. He hands me the envelope with the ticket and the money in the moment. I know I will never ask my father for money ever again. I knew deep inside that I could and would survive. I was going to Berlin. I was going to claim my dream. I was going to find where I belonged. I would not let my father's projections stop me. I was learning to believe in myself regardless of how much resistance I encountered. I was learning to believe in something inside that was greater than my body and more powerful than my ego. Thanks, everyone.